Welcome to the Wealth Matters podcast, where investors come together to better understand how to build passive cash flow and create generational wealth without all the confusing mumbo-jumbo. Here's your host and co-author of Amazon #1 bestseller, Alpesh Pamar.
Welcome to Wealth Matters podcast. I am going to talk to Mr. Jorge Newberry, and with full disclaimer, I personally have invested in his American Home Preservation Fund for steady return. George founded American Home Preservation to buy distressed mortgage at discounts and offer struggling families sustainable solutions to stay in their homes. However, when the homes backing the mortgages were vacant, he recognized that lenders frequently struggled as they tried to limit their losses. And that's what we are going to talk about, because last year, George founded another business, preREO, to get these vacant properties into the hands of local investors during the foreclosure process. And I want to learn more about it as well. And I'm pretty sure that all my listeners do, because I would love to, buy these properties and pennies on the dollar. So welcome,
Absolutely.
George.
Thank you very much, Alpesh. Great to connect.
Absolutely. Hey, so before we get started, I always ask my guests, tell us something funny or interesting about yourself.
Um, One thing is when I was 16, I passed the GED and I left school. So I finished 10th grade. That was my last school, my last year in school. But I did so with my parents' permission, and I started a record company. And I'd already started it, a record company of punk bands in Southern California. We put out 7 albums of different
Wow.
different bands, and that was a different era. I was 16. I did it between I was 16 and 19, and that was one. And then right after that, I moved into bike racing. I was in the 1988 Olympic trials for bike racing.
And that was interesting because I have been getting into fitness, well, or not getting into, I have been doing a lot of Spartan Tough Mudder race.
Uh-huh.
And so when I read your book, Burn Zone, it was very fascinating because I could relate.
Sure.
And I want to do a triathlon, right? So it was pretty interesting.
Good.
No, that's awesome. So what was your very first real estate investment?
Sure. I bought a 4-unit apartment building in South Central Los Angeles in 1992.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's a long time ago.
While
So
ago.
almost 30 years ago. And it started.
I feel
started
young
there.
again.
Yes, exactly. And I feel old.
Oh, wow. So how did that work out?
Sure. It worked out fine. It was at that point, I started in 1990 after finishing my bike racing career. I moved into being a loan officer, and I started working in a phone room where I was answering the phones of people wanting to get refinances and different mortgages. And I gradually rose in the company. And then one of our clients said, "Hey, my dad's looking to move this 4-unit building. Know anyone to list?" I said, "Well, maybe I'll buy it." And so I just bought it. That started it. I bought 4 units. Within a few months, I bought a 19-unit building, and then I just kept buying from there. Interesting, another little side note. My dad's from Argentina. My mom's from England. In Argentina, most children stay at home until they get married. And so
Right.
I was in my mid, not so common in the US though.
Right.
But I was,
I was going there.
yeah. So I started working, when I was about 25 as a loan officer. I started making pretty good money. After a couple of years, I was branch manager, and then I started my own mortgage company and making good money, but living at home. So, the expenses were pretty small. So I was able to use that money to buy apartment buildings. And that's what I started doing. So that, within a few years, I had 500 units in Southern California. And, eventually, as we'll continue this conversation, I grew the portfolio to 4,000 units. And that was mostly when I was still living at home.
Wow, that is interesting and fascinating too. And you are right. In America and maybe Europe as well, that's not how it works. But other parts of the country like South America and Asia, you live with the parents till you get married. Right?
Absolutely. And at some point you start helping take care of your parents, which is,
Yeah,
what I did.
that's exactly what it is.
Uh-huh.
So now let's move on to the REO section. So what is first, can you define for us what is an REO itself?
Sure, sure. So when a bank forecloses on a home and it becomes real estate owned, which is REO for short, and that is, almost every lender, every mortgage company, every bank at some point has an REO. Right now, foreclosure moratoriums across the country, not so many REOs, hence, and there's just not many distressed properties in the market. But fast forward a year or some point, all these foreclosure moratoriums end. There's millions of families that are delinquent on their mortgage payments right now. I hope they all catch up, but it's unrealistic to believe that's going to happen. There will be millions of likely this will result in millions of REOs in a year or so, whenever this all happens. And so that's an REO, but it's common across the country. There's always some. But I'll tell you, REO listing brokers right now, there's real estate brokers that focus on listing REOs. They are almost starving right now. There's just
They're
not enough
struggling. I
business.
was
Yeah,
going to
it's
say
tough.
that.
It's tough.
Whereas the MLS brokers are killing it.
Yeah, exactly. They're just doing regular home sales. They're doing much better.
And actually they don't even have to work hard right now. The homes
Yeah.
are just selling without doing open house. I was just virtual tours, and people are buying $1.5 million houses in our neighborhood, just virtual tour, not even open house, nothing.
That's
like
insane.
this is easy job right now.
And they're probably getting multiple offers.
Oh yeah,
multiple offers,
way
over
more than
asking price.
vertical. Yeah, 10% above asking, at least 10, 15 offers. So yeah.
When that happens, there's a lot of reasons for that, but when that happens, it usually precipitates a downturn.
Yes.
How hot this can get and how long it can go, that remains to be seen. But at some point, goes the other direction, and usually the higher it the greater the height, the higher this rises, the greater the crash.
Greater the fall. Yep.
It's going to happen at some point.
That is correct. And history repeats itself.
It's over and over. You're right. You can see it's just a cycle like this, up and down, up and down, up and down. It's people always say this time it's different. It's never different.
Maybe this time it's not the banks itself. This time it would be the government.
Yeah, exactly. The government's flooding the country with money. And these low interest rates are obviously a big component to that, but that it's going to come to an end.
Right. No, I know that. I can tell for sure. So we understood what is an REO. So what is then pre-REO?
Sure. So pre-REO is a first mortgage that's in default, typically in foreclosure, and originally the concept was it's a first mortgage that is in default that is vacant. And so if it's vacant, the family's left, usually they owe more than the house is worth. That is highly likely going to become an REO at some point. It just needs to go through the foreclosure process. Since then, though, since we've had funds say, hey, what about offering first mortgages that are in default, that are secured by tenant occupied properties? So we added those. We said, yeah, we could do that. And then they said, well, how about first mortgages in foreclosure secured by owner-occupied properties? And we said, well, we can do that too. So all of those mortgages plus REOs, just regular REOs, are available on our website, preREO.com.
Got it. So another question I have, and that's just my thought. You were buying notes through AHP fund, and then of course you started AHP servicing, and I know both of them are very successful. Then why venture into pre-REO deals?
Sure. We actually did this initially just to sell our notes that are in these our first mortgages that AHP owns that are vacant, secured by vacant properties, and in typically a long foreclosure state, a judicial foreclosure state like New York. It's going to take 3 years. So that's going to be the extreme. I'm in Illinois. It'll typically take a year, maybe a bit more. But let me use the extreme case, which is New York State. If we have a home where, let's say, the homeowner passed away, and so the home is now vacant, and we start foreclosure, even if nobody fights the foreclosure, it's still going to take us 3 years before we can get title to the home and we can sell it. So what happens in that 3 years? Nobody's taking care of the property. It's sitting there vacant. Grass needs to be cut. snow needs to be shoveled. If someone breaks in, they could steal the plumbing, steal appliances. And so the value that was there when we started this process, when somebody lived in there, it deteriorates. It goes down with time because the property just gets in worse and worse shape.
Right.
So I always thought, God, no one cares. We could just put a tenant in there, and then we could, collect some rent, and they'll keep the property in better shape, up until the point of the foreclosure. Now, we don't own the property, so we couldn't do that. But we came up with a strategy, which is to appoint a receiver, which is typically a real estate agent, and the receiver can be authorized by the court to do necessary repairs, to rent the property through the foreclosure process, even though, and that money can go towards the loan. So even though we don't own the property as a lender, we can institute this process. So, but now here's a problem is, you have these properties all across the country. We're not experts in renovations, and we can't see the properties. We can send inspectors out there, but we wanted somebody local who had a vested interest in the successful outcome of that property to be essentially be a partner. So how we did it is we set up preREO. We sell an interest in the mortgage to the local investor, and then we put up some of the money. We put up 75% of the money. They put up 25% of the money to buy the note, and then then they kind of help select the contractors, work with the receiver to agree on a tenant, how much they're going to charge for rent. They know the market much better than we do. So that's how we started preREO. And originally it was just AHP loans, but right now there's several other funds that are placing loans on preREO to sell, because it's a model that works for the fund, because they're willing to take a discount. If the property is worth $100,000, they'll sell the note for $75,000 today. And 25% discount sounds like a lot, but if they get the money today versus, a year,
Yes.
2 years, 3 now, plus all those costs, it's a better deal for them. So the investor wins, especially in the market like today where they can't find inventory. So the local investor wins and the lender wins. So we see the ability to scale preREO significantly, especially through the next downturn.
That is interesting. So let me understand, or if you can take me through the process of acquiring a preREO. Let's say I like a property, and just an example here in Stockton, California, which is listed on preREO. And what do I do next? I
Sure.
look at the property. What's the next step?
Sure. So to be clear, there's REOs and preREOs. So I'll focus on REOs because I'm preREOs.
PreREOs.
REOs is a more traditional, just like we can get you access, you can look at the property. But with a preREO, you can't have access to the property because we don't own it. So you're having to make a decision on, probably what the condition is of the inside based on what you see from the outside. But you can go to our site, preREO.com. You can make a bid. The lender will either accept the bid or they'll counter the bid. You may go back and forth a few rounds and eventually agree to a price. And at the closing, you are funding 25% of the purchase price of the note. So let's say it's $100,000. So you put up $25,000. We at preREO will put up the other $75,000, and then that note goes into a trust. The trustee is U.S. Bank, and the local investor. There's hundreds of mortgages in that trust, and then the local investor gets a participation interest in just that one mortgage, and so the loan stays in the name of U.S. Bank Trust National Association as trustee of this trust. And there's a couple of good things about that. One is some states, about half the states, require that a mortgage holder has a license to own a mortgage. And so, but they have exemptions for trusts with National Bank trustees. So check the box for compliance for owning a mortgage. And also, because it's tough, if we're putting up 75% and someone else is putting up 25%, putting them in the trust is a way that we can make sure that we get our money back at the closing. And so it's tough to put a mortgage on a mortgage, but if you put them in a trust, it works out well for both sides. And just so you know how our share works, we put up our money. We look for a 12% return. Everything over and above that, all the upside goes to the local investor.
Okay, so I have some more questions.
Sure.
So one is that I like the property and I put the bid. So because it's a preREO, I cannot take a look at the property. So It's more like auction house then. I'm bidding and someone
Yeah,
can counter bid, right? So, I have to
exactly.
make sure this is the property I want and this is the max I'm going to pay, not
Hmm.
knowing what's inside, right? Because REO, then, I can go through the agent and whatnot and take a look at the property, right? So that's one
Right.
thing. And the second is, what kind of trust is that? Is that a land trust? Is that,
It's a Delaware statutory trust.
okay, DSTs.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what it is. And there's a national bank trustee,
Got
which is
it.
the U.S. Bank.
Got it. And then the third thing you mentioned that 12% is what AHP wants to make out of this. So when you are putting up money, let's say 100,000, the number we took, 75 grand came from AHP and 25 came from me. So that 75, am I paying any interest upfront, or when does that interest start, or is it
It's
after I sell,
no, yeah, good
or
question.
when
No,
rented?
it's paid yeah, no, it's paid monthly. So the it'll start roughly 45 days after your closing and monthly thereafter. So in the first, if it's a vacant one, in the first few months, you probably have no rental income.
Right.
So you'll probably just be paying it. Ideally, if it is a vacant asset that you're able to put in a receiver and start collecting rent, a few months in, okay, now you have rental income that should, ideally would cover that or offset it. And but it is payable on a monthly basis.
Got it. So the next question would be that, the interest payment starts, and you mentioned a pretty interesting thing about receiver, and I did understand because I have attended your boot camp or the workshop. Uh, but who is a receiver? Can I be the receiver, or do I have to hire like real estate agent, someone third party to be a receiver? And how does that work? Do I have to pay them as well? Because that's another
Yep.
cost.
It's a good question. So the receivers can't be you, can't be an immediate family member, can be somebody that you already have a business relationship with. There's supposed to be third party, independent, and it needs to be a person, not a company. So it could be a real estate
Ah,
agent that could be typically it's a real estate agent. And the real estate agent, it makes a lot of sense for because now they can look at it. Okay, I can rent this place for 1,000 a month, and you agree to pay them anywhere from 5 to 10%, so they're getting $50 to $100 each month as a property management fee. And
oh,
then,
okay. So more
yeah,
like property manager that they
exactly.
connect. Okay.
And then at the end, they're expecting that at least some of the investors, once they complete the foreclosure, they're going to say, "Hey, I want to just list it for me," and then they can sell it and they'll make a commission. So that's basically the incentive for the agents to act as receivers.
Okay, now I get it. So another question I have, and I looked at the website, so there are some due diligence document. How should an investor who is a newbie like me perform due diligence? What are the
Sure.
things to look for?
There's typically two reports at least uploaded to the website and each property profile. One is a BPO, broker's price opinion, which will give an estimate of value. Now, this is a local agent's estimate of value. So be aware it's not precise and you want to use it as a reference point. Maybe do some online research, maybe talk to local agents and come up with okay, I think it's worth this. And then the other thing that's typically uploaded is a title report, which should show that the mortgage is in first position, will show any second mortgage or judgments or delinquent taxes or any or even current taxes should all be on the title report. So those are the two um, items that are going to be the primary things to take a look at. You want to get comfortable with whatever the value is, and also see the title report, see if there's delinquent taxes or anything else that may have an impact on the mortgage. As a reference, the foreclosure will typically extinguish the interest of a second mortgage. Of
Right.
any judgments will typically all go, with the exception of maybe code enforcement liens, which sometimes are on there. So those are things to look out for. The good news is, we understand that many of the investors who are buying notes through preREO are buying them for the first time. So we try to hold their hands,
Okay.
both us at preREO, at AHP Servicing, and then the law firm that we work with, which is Activist Legal, can kind of hold each investor's hand through the process. And then after the first few times, they'll probably kind of get okay, I know
Yes.
I've seen this before. I know what to do now.
Got it. Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. That, a newbie investor, if someone is not holding their hands, it's going to be difficult because this also requires a lot of legal stuff, right? As well as in receivers, these that.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this add up, right? And so what's a typical BPO, like, let's say if it's $100,000 property, should I look for that it has to have a BPO of 125,000 or 130,000? What's a good number? Or
Yeah. So we suggest to sellers that they list these at 75% of the BPO value.
Oh, okay,
So if
okay,
they
so I
think
was
it would
close.
sell, yeah, you're close. Exactly. So they think it's REO. If it was sold for 100, it'd be, if they want to list it at 100, it's probably worth 133. If they want to list it at 75, it's probably worth 100. So there's always a built-in margin. But again, the BPOs are just a reference. They may not be they may
Right,
not be precise. But so you can offer whatever you want, but just because they're asking for 100,000 doesn't mean you have to
right.
pay 100. You could offer
Yeah,
lower. A lot of them sell for less. So once in a while, some of them sell for a little bit more. So whatever you think is appropriate price is what you pay or what you bid.
got it. The next question is, of course, it may go back to the previous question, but what are some of the pitfalls to avoid while acquiring pre-REO property? What are some of the gotchas?
Uh, so the big, well, I think the challenge, we encourage investors to buy locally, so something that they can get to readily, they can actually see, they probably have an advantage, or they definitely have an advantage over, an institutional owner, that mortgage or a lender, if they know that market. So I think one thing is to buy local, at least to start, and then you may know an agent, you have relationships with contractors and stuff like that. Where can you go wrong? I mean, these things can take a while, so don't an REO, you can take control right now, you can sell it right away, rent it right away. This may take time. You're at the mercy a bit of the court. With the COVID, there's foreclosure moratoriums across the country that can make
Right.
it slow to proceed a foreclosure. Most states are allowing foreclosures of vacant properties to proceed, but not all. So probably want to be aware of that. You may not be able to move right away forward with the foreclosure. Even the receiverships, typically a receivership action should be heard within roughly 30 days. Right now, I'd say on average, it's taking 2 or 3 months before a court will even hear it. And so those things do take time. So time's always an enemy at least when the property is vacant. But that's the advantage of pre-REO. Once you get a tenant in there, even if the foreclosure takes an extra 6 months, you're still collecting rent each month. And that, I think, is the big plus that we can offer, and that gives the local investor and somebody who's using pre-REO strategy a big advantage.
So that's a great point you mentioned, and I want to understand more. So even if the foreclosure proceedings are ongoing, I can have the receiver, um, and who can fix the property and rent it out, even if there is a separate legal process which is for the foreclosure. So I can
Yep.
still keep making money. Okay.
Yeah. So even if it takes longer or whatnot, then you can still continue to collect rent. And just to be clear, in most states, the foreclosure and receivership action will be the same action. And so they can actually, it's not two separate lawsuits, it's one lawsuit. And if they were just starting foreclosure and the property was vacant, most of these are already in foreclosure. But if they're not, then they can file it as part of the same lawsuit.
Got it. And my second question is that I can rent out the property when it's vacant, but let's say it's not vacant. So do I see those not vacant properties as well on pre-REO? And what
Sure.
would be the next course of action in that case?
Yeah, no, those are typically identified in the property description, whether it's vacant or occupied. If it's occupied by a tenant, then you can do the same thing. You can appoint a receiver, and the receiver can now collect the rent from the tenant, provided they're paying. And so now they just interrupt that income stream. If the tenant isn't paying, and the receiver's been appointed, they can actually evict the tenant.
Okay.
So those are those are things where so that works if it's a tenant. If it's an owner,
Okay,
you can't
that's
do
where I was
anything.
going.
Yeah. If it's an owner, there's no receiver. I mean, you can't use a receiver. There's no rent to collect, nothing. You just have to wait until it's resolved. So that's a big and then they could say they want to do a loan
Right.
modification, or they want to do a deed in lieu. Obviously, most investors in this sphere will want a deed in lieu. Yeah, I'll take
Right.
that. I'll even pay him $1,000 or something like that.
Yeah,
A
cash for keys.
modification, yeah, exactly, cash for keys. The modification they may or may not want to do depending on their investment strategies, but the reality is you can still make money with modifications. You can, if they pay on time for a while, you can sell that loan probably at a markup over what was paid. So those I encourage investors, if it is occupied by the owner, to be open to whatever strategy the family wants. The family may say, we want out of here, give us moving money. And then they get the property without even having to wait through a foreclosure receivership. But if it's a mod, they also need to be receptive to, hey, I can make a decent return just collecting cash flow. If you buy, a dozen of these or even 5 of these, you're going to start seeing that, okay, a percentage go this path, a percentage go that path. And what I encourage against is if a family is in the home and has the ability to make a modified payment and request a modification and you don't agree, then you could say, okay, well, I'm just not going to agree, and then it's going to go through the foreclosure, and that may be right, but it may be wrong. That local, if a family feels that they have not been treated, gotten what they want, they may get an attorney and drag out the foreclosure, and then you may wish that you took them on. So this is, learned over buying thousands of these over the years. You definitely want to do what the homeowner wants, on these occupied ones. On the vacant ones, it's going REO. I mean, in the 90% plus of the time. I'll give you one exception. I always said that, and so far, everyone that we sold on pre-REO that was vacant, nobody's fought the receivership or the foreclosure. But we did have one about a month ago. The homeowner had passed away. We started the foreclosure, and someone had bought it on pre-REO. And then the heirs of the family members of the person who passed away showed up and brought the loan up to date. And now now the pre-REO buyer, it's good. I mean, they bought the loan at a discount.
Right. So yeah, they got paid. Yeah.
It's a pretty good deal, but they didn't get paid off. They just got brought up to date. But now that investor kind of, really wanted the property. Well, that's not going to happen because I guess there's sentimental value. They wanted the property.
Yeah.
And so, but now they can sell that loan and probably make a markup just from now. They have a loan that's up to date.
Yeah, that's an exception, and that reminds me of a quote from one of the guru. Don't fall in love with your investment.
No. Right? Yeah, be willing to take some money out and move on.
Right. Yeah.
There's always more. It's never the once in a lifetime opportunity. There's always more. Exactly.
And we were chatting about that before we started the podcast, right? Because we know this is a cycle. There will always be an opportunity, right?
Up and down, up and down.
Exactly. So one more question about the owner occupied. Let's say it's a pre-REO owner occupied, and I got that deal. Does my interest payment start from the same day as well? In that case too?
Yes, it does. Okay. Same thing.
So while you are waiting and of course you are trying to figure out, you are still paying the interest. Okay. Just making sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, think if the person modifies now, you can, presumably cover offset the payment with the monthly payment that they're paying. In most cases, they probably won't. But they may sell the property on a short sale. They may give you a deed in lieu. So there's all kinds of options that could happen. And time will tell.
Okay, got it. So one more question. Which states, and because we skip hearing non-disclosure states, judicial states, so which states are better and which states are worse for preREO? If you can just pick, let's say top 3 for
so the judicial foreclosure states that take a long time to foreclose, basically judicial means it goes to the court system. And I'll give you examples: New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Florida, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Ohio. There's a lot those are going to be where pre-REO is most effective, because the lender is saying it's going to take a year or 2 to foreclose. It's better just to sell them through pre-REO. On the non-judicial foreclosure states like California, where you're at, Nevada, Arizona, these are the foreclosure generally goes much faster, the foreclosure process, and as a result, the lenders aren't as willing to sell, and so you'll see less inventory there. There's some, but not like California and New York. There's 10 times more probably in New York than there are in California for that exact reason.
Okay. So at least California has something good.
That's right.
Other than the taxes and everything. Yeah. So no, that's pretty interesting. And we were chatting, before we started recording. What do you anticipate in next couple of years, 3 years? Because we have seen property values go up significantly. And as you mentioned, because of not eviction moratorium, but the foreclosure moratorium or forbearance, we are not saying a lot of pre-REOs or foreclosure. So do you, because you you created this business or launched the business last year. Are you seeing something which we are not? That, in a couple of years or 3 years, what's coming?
Well, at some point, I mean, the common industry sentiment is that there is a looming crush of foreclosures, oversupply of inventory, all these things that should have a dampening effect on the real estate market and bring prices, slow down the rise and probably at some point bring them down. I mean, if you look through history, it's like a pyramid. I mean, real estate's like a pyramid scheme in some respects. The prices go up and everybody gets in, and the last person in who buys at the top of the market is the one that loses money. Everybody else made money, and then they crash and it starts over. And so it's and right now, I mean, if you bought, I mean, we're seeing consistently pre-COVID and post-COVID prices, and you would think a pandemic hits the country, that pricing is going to drop. And the pandemic hit the country, and here we are almost a year later. I'd say on average, there's 15, 20% appreciation in a lot of markets.
Yes.
And that's obviously significant, fueled by low interest rates and maybe some of the government flooding, the result of the government flooding the system.
The stimulus money,
cash.
Yep.
Yeah. And so those things, and then also people want to spend more time at home.
Right.
And so there's reasons that they want to buy a home and things like that. But if you just look through history, there's this up and down. It just keeps happening. And so at some point, this goes the other direction. And there's a lot of different elements this time. The pandemic, super low interest rates, millions of families default and delinquent on their payments. So a lot of these forces, at some point, it does go the other direction. And you want to be a seller today for sure. Once it goes the other direction, you want to be a buyer today, but you could sell today, and in 6 months you say, oh, it went up another 10%. I should have sold. But you never know when the end is. That's
the beauty of investing in, even if you are doing stock market or real estate or crypto, you cannot time the market.
No,
there is no one has the crystal ball.
No, even if you bought GameStop, you never really knew when.
Yes, exactly. What happened? So this was awesome. Let's take a quick break, and after the break, we'll go through the same 5 questions I ask every guest.
Okay.
You're listening to the Wealth Matters Podcast. The Wealth Matters Podcast. For more info about what we do, check us out at wealthmatters.com. It's wealth, WEALTH, matters, MATRS.com.
Welcome back to Wealth Matters Podcast. And I was chatting, and I'm still chatting with Jorge Newberry on preREO deals. George, are you ready for fire round?
I'm ready.
Let's go. Would you be changing business or investment strategy after COVID pandemic is over?
Yes, you have to evolve constantly, and the market will probably still be doing similar things, but we'll have different. The strategy will evolve. You need to evolve with the market.
Got it. Favorite real estate or finance or any other related book?
I hate to say, I don't want to plug my own book, but I'm going to. So Burn Zones is right here. Let's see if you can see it. Oh, you can't see it on the screen.
Yeah,
but Burn Zones,
because of the green screen.
Yeah,
for both of us.
but it's Burn Zones is a book I wrote. Kind of shares my financial rise and my financial collapse. And I think there's a lot of knowledge to be gained from that. I mean, I keep from my desk. The crazy thing, I once in a while, pretty often I refer back to little passages, reminds me of some things, things that have happened in my past. So hopefully some of your listeners may have interest in picking it up.
That's awesome. Any tool or website you recommend or you cannot live without?
I hate to be a self-promoter. preREO is people are making good money on preREO right now. My vision going forward is that in a year or two, people are making a living buying preREOs, just like people make a living on Uber or Lyft,
right?
Or even buying people. I know people who make a living buying REOs off auction.com. So same thing. I want people to make livings off preREO.
So is there any tool or website or app you would recommend for someone when they are looking at the properties in preREO, let's say for due diligence or anything? Can they go to a third-party website for underwriting? I'm not sure.
Yeah, sure. There's, Realty Track, Zillow. These the basic, the common ones.
Okay.
My favorite tool in real estate is one that I've had since my first year in real estate, which again, you can't see, but an HP 12C calculator. Really, it's awesome.
It always works.
It always works. It hasn't changed much in 30 years, but you can calculate payment. There's so much you can calculate on there, and it's so it's so handy. So I still have that on top of my desk. I use it every day.
That's awesome.
Probably since for the last 30 years.
Any advice for beginner investors?
Sure. If you want to really make money in real estate, or for that matter, anything, you need to be willing to take risks. I mean, these are not silly risks, but calculated risks. That's where you make big money. I mean, you can invest in turnkey properties, easy, predictable properties, and you can make money, but your returns will be modest. If you really want to knock it out of the park, you buy properties where there's some unpredictability, where it's a severely challenged property for whatever. Yeah, major distress. That's where your big returns are, and that's where you can make a lot of money much faster than taking a more predictable route. But you can also lose money that way. So I guess that's the coin side. But if you're willing to do the work and you take smart risks, that's how to make a lot of money in real estate or just about anything. That's
a great advice. How do you give back?
How do I give back? So my company, the majority of my companies, American Homeowner Preservation on down, are pursue a social mission as well as a financial one. And with AHP, it was originally a nonprofit with a mission of keeping families at risk of foreclosure in their homes. It evolved, and as we discovered that, hey, we can buy these loans at discounts, we can generate a good financial return and achieve our financial mission. So I'm much more keen on developing for-profit businesses that can scale social missions than the traditional. Not to say it's either way is better or worse, but I find it more scalable when it's a for-profit model than simply like giving money away to charities or whatnot.
That's great. Thank you so much, George. How can my listeners reach out to you?
Sure. preREO is at preREO.com. We welcome you to visit. I'm at J Newberry, and I'll spell it because spelling's going to throw people off, but JNEWBERY, that's just one R, at preREO.com.
Thank you again, George. I thoroughly enjoyed the entire discussion, and I'm going to check out preREO again.
I appreciate that, Alpesh. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Take care.
I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for listening to the Wealth Matters podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes so others can enjoy the show too. Have a great week and happy investing.